Hello, students. As you know, for the past couple of days, we have been looking at the division of Germany after World War II. More specifically, yesterday we dove into the division of Berlin, the capital of Germany, after World War II. Please follow along as I go through this concept map, which will help us review the concepts we have learned in this unit thus far. The setting of post-World War II Germany. As you remember, on May 7th, 1945, the war in Europe is concluded with the German surrender. And at the time, Berlin and Germany is split into four sections. There's the French, English, German, and Soviet sections. In addition, Germany is in shambles, as is much of Europe, with buildings blown up, displaced persons, and collapsed governments. Here, as you can see in this map, this is how Germany was divided into four parts. Not to worry though, if you can't read this map because it is too small. Later on, we will be looking at a PowerPoint photo gallery of all the photos and images in this concept map at a larger scale. As you can see here, we have the United Kingdom, or Britain, France, the US, and the Soviet Union, with Berlin being this little white dot right there. So, the causes of the division. The Soviet Union looked to control much of Eastern Europe. As you remember, they had this westward movement during the war, pushing their way further west until they got to Berlin. And after the war, they looked to implement communist governments in the countries that they went to and that are in Eastern Europe today, such as Poland, the Ukraine, and Belarus, just to name a few. But America looked to stop the spread of communism before it moved any further west. So the Soviets warned and wanted that they were going to put a Soviet government control on Eastern Germany to where there would be a communist puppet state in the larger Soviet Union satellite state network. However, the governments of the United States, the United Kingdom, and France wanted to place a non-communist government in all the parts of Germany. So, what ends up happening, as you know, Western Germany becomes a democratic state, and the French, British, and American sectors become one, while Eastern Germany becomes a communist puppet state of the Soviet Union, and the peoples living in East Germany are under a new dictatorship after that of Adolf Hitler. And this dictatorship is in Moscow from the different Soviet premiers throughout the history of the Cold War. And as a refresher, the Cold War is this war that's not necessarily where guns are being shot or battles are being fought on battlegrounds. It's more of a political war where it's East versus West. So that basically the Soviets versus America and their allies and all of that. So this ends the alliance that America and the Soviet Union shared during World War II, and they become enemies. And as you learned yesterday, in 1961, Berlin was divided into two parts, officially and physically, with the construction of the Berlin Wall in 1961. And spoiler alert, it will stick around until 1989. As you can see on this picture, remember, not to worry if you can't see it, this white dot is Berlin, and we will go into further detail of how it was divided during our slideshow presentation. Here are some important political figures that we looked at yesterday during our unit on Berlin after World War II and at the beginning of the Cold War. John F. Kennedy, who was the American president at the time, Nikita Khrushchev, who was the premier of the Soviet Union, Konrad Adenauer, who was the chancellor of Germany, and Walter Ulbricht, who was the premier chancellor of Eastern Germany. Now, moving on to our slideshow presentation. Notice here that this is Berlin right after the end of World War II. This big building right here is the Bundestag, which is the which is the government building where all the government officials meet in Germany, and they still meet there to this day. Fun fact, Mr. Franco stood right here in front and on the side and took many pictures in front of this building on his trip to Berlin in December of 2018. And let me tell you, students, it is quite the sight to see this place in person. This is the map of the division of Germany into 4 parts. Remember, the United Kingdom, France, and the US are in the western part of Germany, while the Soviet Union is in the eastern part of Germany, and Berlin is mixed into the eastern part and the communist/Soviet part of Germany. This is what this is what Germany looked like after it was decided how it was officially going to be divided up, where a democratic government was implemented in the western part of Germany, while a communist government was implemented here in the German Democratic Republic. And here we see Berlin. Now, what you notice with Berlin is there's a red line going through it. I will explain that later. But Berlin was also the capital of Eastern Germany. So it is also the capital of Germany during the war and before the war. So that leaves us questioning, well, where is the capital of Western Germany? That was in Bonn, which is not on this map, but it's right about here in between Dusseldorf and Wiesbaden. This is a closer look at Berlin during the division into its 2 parts. Here we see Western Berlin, which was under the control of the democratic government in West Germany in Bonn, whereas the eastern portion was under the communist control of the East German government. As you see here, this black outline is the Berlin Wall and the way that it formed a perimeter around West Berlin. Here is a portrait of American President John F. Kennedy. And as you remember, yesterday we listened to a snippet of his Ich bin ein Berliner speech from Western Germany, and actually, to be more precise, Western Berlin during the early portion of 1963, where he looks to show that he is with Berlin and that he wants to see families reunited, because remember, once that wall went up, there were families that were split, and some family members lived in East Berlin and others lived in West Berlin. Funny tidbit, when President Kennedy says, Ich bin ein Berliner, many argue that he claimed that he was a donut, because a Berliner is a donut. It's a jelly-filled donut that they still eat today in many parts of Germany and Eastern Europe. It's a jelly-filled donut with a powdered sugar top. I've eaten my weight in these and they are fabulous. They are delicious. Here we see a picture of Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev. This is Kennedy's kind of quote unquote rival during his Ich bin ein Berliner speech. Then here we have Konrad Adenauer, the Chancellor of Western Germany. So he's by Kennedy's side. He, agrees with Kennedy that we kind of need to get Germany back to where all Germans are unified together and there's not this split. Then we have here Walter Ulbricht, who is the premier, the chancellor, you could say, in the same kind of aspect as Mr. Adenauer, but Mr. Ulbricht is the head of the East German government, so he is kind of an ally to Khrushchev. Here we see our text for today that we will be analyzing. In this assignment, I am asking you to look at this picture and try and read visually what it is saying to us. Yes, I know there are 4 words, Ich bin ein Berliner, and they're in German, but it means I am a Berliner. I want you to look at this and try and see what you pick out. Just some helpful hints, some advice of what to look for. Notice here we have the Statue of Liberty, and she's lifting up the Berlin Wall. And here on this side, we see crowds of East German citizens running to family members in West Germany. Then we see here that there's this light that she is providing with her torch. Darkness, we can assume, means the darkness of East Germany. Because remember, East Germany and East Berlin was not as great as government officials made you think, whereas West Berlin was experiencing at the time an economic boom. Here we see the concept map that you will be filling out while looking at this political cartoon, also our text for today. I would like you to find 3 main ideas from the text, and please write down any questions you have or anything that makes you think, oh, okay, well, maybe why is it not like this or is it like that? Not to worry if you feel like your responses are maybe lacking, or if they're not, if you don't feel like they're filled with information, because we as a class will go through this and I will walk you through my thoughts on this cartoon after you fill it out. And remember, you also, prior to us coming back together, you will be discussing with your classmates, or debating, I should say, a topic that I will pose. It's a question that I will pose to you that kind of gets you to do some critical thinking, and I would like you to look at that question, write a 2 to 3 sentence response to the question in your own kind of perspective on it, and then look to 2 of your classmates' responses and give a 2 to 3 sentence response on what you think about their comment. I wish you lots of luck in your journey to learn more about the Berlin Wall, and we'll see you later as we work through this concept map.